The sun was setting over a dusty gas station on the outskirts of Redfield, Arizona, when Jake Ironside Mercer felt the tug on his leather vest. He turned to see a small girl, no older than 7, with tangled brown hair and eyes that had seen too much. She pressed a crumpled piece of paper into his calloused hand and vanished between the parked trucks before he could say a word. The note was written in shaky letters with a purple crayon. "They took my mum. Blue van, license GHT 4729. Please help," she said, "to find the man with the iron cross." Jake's blood ran cold. 20 years ago, he had made a promise to a woman named Sarah Chen. A promise that if she ever needed him, he would come. The iron cross tattooed on his forearm wasn't just ink. It was an oath forged in the fires of war, sealed in the quiet moments after battle when 2 soldiers became family. He had lost touch with Sarah after they returned home, but he never forgot. Now her daughter had found him, and the clock was ticking. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. This story will stay with you long after it ends. The gas station smelled of diesel fuel and burnt coffee. Jake stood frozen, the note trembling slightly in his weathered hand. Around him, the world continued its mundane rhythm. Truckers filling tanks, tourists stretching their legs, the cashier arguing with someone over lottery tickets. But for Jake, time had stopped. He read the note 3 more times, each word burning deeper into his consciousness. The handwriting was childish but deliberate, each letter pressed hard into the paper, as if the girl had poured all her hope into those few sentences. Jake looked around frantically, searching for the small figure that had appeared and disappeared like a ghost. He spotted her 30 yards away, crouched behind a rusted pickup truck, watching him with desperate eyes. Their gazes locked for a moment, and Jake saw something that made his chest tighten. She wasn't crying, wasn't panicking. She was waiting to see if he would help or walk away like so many others might have done. Jake took a step toward her, but she shook her head violently and pressed a finger to her lips. Then she pointed toward the convenience store entrance, where 2 men in dark jackets were scanning the parking lot. One of them spoke into a radio, his eyes cold and methodical. They were looking for her. Jake understood immediately. If those men found the girl before he could act, whatever chance Sarah had would vanish. He turned away casually, pretending to check his motorcycle, but his mind was racing through options. The men were professionals. Their posture, their communication style, the way they moved in coordinated sweeps. This wasn't some random kidnapping. Someone had planned this carefully, and they had resources. Jake pulled out his phone and opened the encrypted messaging app that connected him to the Iron Promise Brotherhood. His fingers moved quickly across the screen. "Code red, Sarah Chen taken, daughter at risk, Redfield gas station, need immediate backup." He hit send and pocketed the phone. Within seconds, it began vibrating with responses. The little girl had moved again, this time closer to the tree line behind the station. Jake caught her eye and gave a subtle nod toward his motorcycle. She understood. While the 2 men entered the convenience store, Jake walked slowly toward his bike, his movements relaxed and unhurried. He straddled the machine and started the engine, letting it rumble to life. The sound was deep and powerful, a lion's roar in the quiet desert evening. He adjusted his mirrors as if preparing for a routine departure, but his eyes never left the girl's hiding spot. She waited until the men were fully inside the store, then sprinted across the asphalt with surprising speed. Jake felt her small body slam against his back as she climbed onto the seat behind him. Her arms wrapped around his waist like a vice, and he could feel her rapid heartbeat through his leather vest. "Hold on tight," he said over his shoulder. Then he twisted the throttle, and the motorcycle surged forward, gravel spraying from the rear tire as they shot out of the parking lot and onto the highway. In his rearview mirror, Jake saw the 2 men burst out of the convenience store, weapons drawn, shouting into their radios. But they were too late. The motorcycle was already disappearing into the desert twilight, its tail light a fading red dot on the horizon. Jake didn't slow down until they were 5 miles from the gas station, the road behind them empty and dark. He pulled onto a dirt access road that led to an abandoned ranch and killed the engine. The sudden silence was overwhelming, broken only by the girl's ragged breathing and the distant cry of a hawk. Jake turned in his seat and looked at her properly for the first time. She was small for 7, with her mother's almond-shaped eyes and determined chin. Dirt streaked her cheeks, and her clothes were rumpled and stained. But she held herself with remarkable composure. "What's your name?" Jake asked gently. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily Chen." Jake felt his throat tighten. Sarah had named her daughter after the flowers that grew wild in the mountains of Afghanistan, where they had served together. "I'm Jake. Your mum and I are old friends, very old friends. Can you tell me what happened?" Lily's lower lip trembled, but she swallowed hard and nodded. "Mom was walking me to school this morning. 3 men came out of a blue van. One of them had a scar on his face. Like this." She traced a line from her temple to her jaw. "They said she owed them money. Mom told me to run, but I hid instead. I heard them say they were taking her to Copper Ridge." Jake's jaw clenched. Copper Ridge was a warehouse district 40 miles north, a place where smugglers and criminals operated with impunity because the local authorities were either paid off or too afraid to intervene. "Did your mom tell you to find me?" Lily nodded. "She always said if something bad happened, I should find the man with the iron cross. She showed me a picture once. She said you made her a promise." Jake pulled up his sleeve, revealing the tattoo on his forearm, an iron cross surrounded by flames, with the words "Iron Promise" beneath it. Lily reached out and touched it with one small finger. "That's it," she breathed. "That's what she showed me." Jake's phone buzzed. The first responses were coming in. "10 minutes out, where do you need us?" "Gearing up now, give me a location." "I'm bringing the whole chapter." "Nobody touches Sarah." Jake typed quickly, "Rally point, Old Miller Ranch, Route 47, 1 hour, come armed, come ready." He looked down at Lily, who was watching him with a mixture of fear and hope. "Listen to me carefully," Jake said, his voice steady and calm. "Your mom is going to be okay. I have friends, a lot of friends, and we're going to get her back. But I need you to be brave a little while longer. Can you do that?" Lily nodded, her small jaw set with determination. "I can be brave. Mum taught me how." Jake smiled despite the weight pressing on his chest. Sarah had done well. She had raised a warrior. As the desert wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and dust, Jake heard the first rumble of approaching motorcycles. The Iron Promise Brotherhood was coming, and when they arrived, hell itself wouldn't be able to stop them. The sound grew louder, a rolling thunder that seemed to shake the very ground. Jake stood and watched as headlights appeared on the horizon, dozens of them, cutting through the gathering darkness like stars falling to earth. The first bike roared into the ranch yard, followed by another, then 3 more, then a wave of chrome and leather that seemed endless. Brothers he hadn't seen in months pulled up beside him, killing their engines and removing their helmets. Marcus Hammerstone, a former Marine with arms like steel cables. Thomas Preacher Mills, who ran a youth center in Phoenix but rode with the Brotherhood on weekends. Elena Widow Vasquez, whose husband had died in the same firefight where Jake met Sarah. Each face was different, but they all shared the same expression, grim determination and absolute loyalty. Jake waited until the last engine fell silent, then stepped forward. The circle of riders tightened around him, their attention focused and unwavering. Lily stood behind him, her hand gripping the back of his vest. "Sarah Chen saved my life in Kandahar," Jake began, his voice carrying across the silent assembly. "She carried me 3 miles through enemy territory after an IED took out our convoy. She refused to leave me behind when it would have been easier, safer, smarter to run. She made sure I came home." He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "Tonight, someone took her. They think she's alone. They think she's vulnerable. They're wrong." The Brotherhood rumbled its approval, a low growl of agreement that needed no translation. The war room of the Iron Promise Brotherhood was a converted barn at the edge of the Miller Ranch, its walls covered with maps, photographs, and the scars of 1,000 planning sessions. Jake spread a topographic map of Copper Ridge across a wooden table while his brothers gathered around. Lily sat in a corner, wrapped in Elena's jacket, watching with wide eyes as the adults worked. "Copper Ridge Warehouse District," Jake said, tapping the map with his finger. 12 square blocks of abandoned factories, storage facilities, and smuggling routes. Sarah's being held somewhere in this area. Marcus leaned forward, his scarred knuckles pressing against the table. "That's a lot of ground to cover. We need intel." "Already working on it," said a voice from the doorway. Jake turned to see Raymond Tech Foster entering with a laptop under his arm. Tech was the Brotherhood's digital specialist, a former NSA analyst who had left the agency after realizing he was spying on American citizens more than foreign threats. He set up his computer on the table and pulled up satellite imagery of Copper Ridge. "I hacked the traffic camera network," Tech said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Blue van, license plate GHT 4729, passed through 3 intersections between noon and 2 p.m. today, heading northeast toward Copper Ridge. Last confirmed sighting was here." He zoomed in on a grainy image showing the van turning into a fenced compound. "That's the old Redstone manufacturing plant. Shut down in 2018, officially abandoned. But look at this." He pulled up thermal imaging from a weather satellite. 6 heat signatures inside the main building, 2 in what looks like a back office. Power consumption is minimal but consistent with generator use. Someone's definitely operating there. Jake studied the image, his mind cataloging every detail. "Security?" "Minimal external," Tech replied. 1 guard at the front gate, possibly another roaming the perimeter. They're relying on isolation rather than manpower. Nobody comes out here unless they're looking for trouble." "Then that's exactly what we're bringing them," Marcus growled. Jake held up his hand for silence. "We do this smart. Sarah's life depends on precision, not rage." He turned to address the assembled riders. "We split into 3 teams. Team Alpha approaches from the east, cutting off the main access road. Team Bravo surrounds the perimeter, blocking all exits. Team Charlie, that's me, Marcus, Elena and Preacher, goes in for extraction. Rules of engagement. We avoid violence unless absolutely necessary. Our goal is Sarah, nothing else. If shooting starts, keep it controlled and away from civilians." Elena checked her weapon, a compact pistol she carried for protection. "What about the girl?" Jake looked at Lily, who stared back at him with her mother's fierce determination. "She stays here with Tech. If something goes wrong, he gets her to safety." Lily opened her mouth to protest, but Elena knelt beside her and took her small hands. "Your mom needs you to be safe so she doesn't have to worry. That's your job right now. Can you do that?" Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Tell her I love her." The convoy rolled out at 11 p.m., a serpent of chrome and leather winding through the desert night. Jake led the formation, his headlight cutting through the darkness like a blade. Behind him, 200 riders followed in perfect formation, their engines synchronized in a symphony of power and purpose. They rode without speaking, communicating through hand signals and the subtle language of the road that only those who truly lived on motorcycles could understand. The desert stretched endlessly on both sides, ancient and indifferent to human drama. But tonight, it would witness something extraordinary, a brotherhood honoring a debt that transcended time, geography, and personal safety. As they approached Copper Ridge, Jake signaled for radio silence. The teams separated smoothly, Team Alpha peeling off toward the eastern access road, while Team Bravo spread out to encircle the target. Jake's extraction team continued toward the Redstone plant, their engines dropping to a low rumble. They parked half a mile from the compound and continued on foot, moving through the shadows like ghosts. The factory loomed ahead, a skeletal structure of rusted steel and broken windows. A single light burned at the front gate, where a guard sat in a folding chair, scrolling through his phone. Jake signaled for Marcus to circle around while he and Elena approached from the front. Preacher stayed back, ready to provide covering fire if needed. The guard never saw them coming. Marcus emerged from the darkness behind him and applied a sleeper hold with the efficiency of someone who had done it 100 times before. The guard slumped unconscious, and Marcus zip-tied his hands and feet before dragging him into the bushes. Jake keyed his radio. Front gate secure. Team Alpha, report. Eastern road blocked. No movement. Team Bravo in position. Perimeter locked down. Jake nodded to Elena and Preacher. Let's go get her. They moved toward the main building, their footsteps silent on the gravel. The door was unlocked, a sign of arrogance that would cost Sarah's captors dearly. Jake pushed it open slowly, his flashlight illuminating a corridor lined with empty offices and debris. Voices echoed from deeper within the building, rough and careless. Jake followed the sound, his heart pounding but his hands steady. Through a doorway he saw her. Sarah Chen sat tied to a metal chair in the center of a room, lit by a single bulb. Her face was bruised, her lips split, but her eyes burned with defiance. 3 men stood around her, one smoking a cigarette, another counting money on a desk. The 3rd man had a scar running from his temple to his jaw, the one Lily had described. "Last chance, Sarah," Scarface said, his voice oily and confident. "Tell us where you hid the data, and this ends. Keep playing hero, and things get ugly." Sarah spat blood at his feet. "I don't have your data. I never did. You've got the wrong person." Scarface laughed. "That's what they all say." He reached for a tool on the desk, something Jake couldn't quite see but could easily imagine. That was when Jake kicked the door open. "She's telling the truth," Jake said calmly, his voice filling the room with authority. "But even if she wasn't, you made one critical mistake." Scarface spun around, his hand moving toward a weapon. "Who the hell are you?" Jake stepped into the light, and Sarah's eyes widened with recognition and relief. "I'm the man who made her a promise," Jake said, "and I keep my promises." The room exploded into motion. Scarface grabbed his gun, but Marcus burst through the back door and slammed him against the wall before he could fire. The other 2 men bolted for the exits and ran straight into Elena and Preacher, who stood blocking the doorways with weapons drawn. "Don't move," Elena said coldly. "Trust me, you don't want to test my patience tonight." Jake crossed the room and cut Sarah's restraints with a tactical knife. She collapsed into his arms, shaking with relief and exhaustion. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. "I told Lily." "I know," Jake interrupted gently. "She found me. She was incredibly brave." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Is she safe?" "She's safe. Tech's watching her at the ranch. She's waiting for you." Outside, the sound of sirens cut through the night. Team Alpha had called the local sheriff, a veteran named Coleman, who understood the code and knew when to look the other way. The kidnappers would be arrested, charged, and dealt with through official channels. But everyone knew the real justice had already been served. We're deep in the Arizona desert right now, and Sarah's finally free. Drop a comment and let us know what you think happens next. The ride back to Miller Ranch was slow and deliberate, the convoy moving at a respectful pace rather than the aggressive speed of the outbound journey. Sarah rode behind Jake, her arms wrapped tightly around his waist, her head resting against his back. She hadn't said much since they left the warehouse, and Jake didn't push her. Some experiences needed silence to process. The desert night was cold and clear. the stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. As the miles passed, Jake felt Sarah's grip relax slightly, her breathing becoming more regular. She was coming back from whatever dark place the kidnapping had taken her to. "You changed your hair," she said suddenly, her voice muffled against his leather vest. Jake smiled despite himself. "You're criticizing my hair after what just happened. I'm a mom. I criticize everything." Jake laughed, and the sound seemed to break something loose in both of them. Sarah began to cry, quietly at first, then with deep, shaking sobs that came from a place of profound relief. Jake pulled over to the side of the road and killed the engine. The rest of the convoy continued past, giving them space. Sarah climbed off the bike and stood with her back to him, her shoulders shaking. Jake waited, giving her time. Finally, she turned around, and in the starlight he could see the tracks of tears cutting through the dust on her face. "I thought I was dead," she said. "I thought Lily would grow up without me, that she'd be alone." "She would never be alone," Jake said firmly. "The Brotherhood would have raised her. She would have known she was loved." Sarah wiped her eyes. "They wanted some data they thought I had. Information about a smuggling route or financial records or something. I have no idea what they were talking about. I'm a nurse, Jake. I work in pediatrics. I don't know anything about criminals or smuggling." Jake frowned. "Then why target you specifically?" "I don't know. But that man with the scar kept insisting I had stolen something from his employer. He said someone gave them my name, said I was a loose end that needed to be tied up." A cold realization settled over Jake. "You were framed. Someone set you up to take the fall for their own crimes." Sarah nodded slowly. "That's what I thought, but I couldn't figure out who or why." "We'll figure it out," Jake promised. "But first, let's get you back to Lily." The reunion happened in the doorway of the converted barn. Lily saw her mother first and froze for a heartbeat, as if afraid she was seeing a ghost. Then she screamed, "Mom!" and sprinted across the yard so fast she was almost airborne. Sarah dropped to her knees and caught her daughter in her arms, both of them crying and laughing and holding each other as if they would never let go. The Brotherhood stood in a respectful circle, watching the scene with expressions that ranged from fierce satisfaction to barely concealed emotion. These were hard men and women, scarred by war and life, but none of them were immune to the power of a mother reunited with her child. Jake stood beside Eleanor, who wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Gets me every time," she muttered. "Yeah," Jake agreed. "It does." That night, the Brotherhood gathered around a fire pit under the stars. Someone had brought beer and food, and the atmosphere shifted from tense preparation to cautious celebration. Sarah sat wrapped in blankets, Lily curled up asleep in her lap, while the riders shared stories and checked their weapons. Marcus approached Jake, his expression serious. "We need to talk about the frame job." Jake nodded. "I know. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make Sarah a target. That doesn't just go away because we rescued her." "I did some digging," Tex said, appearing with his laptop. "The blue van was registered to a shell company that traces back to the Valdez cartel. They run smuggling operations all through the Southwest. But here's the interesting part. 3 weeks ago, a federal witness against the Valdez organization disappeared. Name was Jennifer Martinez. She was a nurse at Phoenix General." Jake felt the pieces clicking together. "Sarah works at Phoenix General?" She does now," Tech confirmed. "But she transferred there from Mercy Hospital 6 months ago. Jennifer Martinez worked at Mercy before she entered witness protection." Sarah overheard the conversation and looked up. "I remember Jennifer. We worked the same shift sometimes. She was quiet, kept to herself. One day she just stopped showing up." "They grabbed the wrong nurse," Jake said. The full picture becoming clear. Someone in the cartel organization knew Jennifer worked at Mercy Hospital, knew she was a nurse with dark hair. When she disappeared into witness protection, they lost track of her. So they went looking for someone who matched her description in the hospital records. And they found me, Sarah finished. They must have assumed I was Jennifer using a different name. Tech nodded grimly. The question is, what do we do now? The cartel still thinks Sarah has whatever information they're looking for. They'll come back. Jake's expression hardened. Then we make sure they understand she's untouchable. Marcus cracked his knuckles. I like the sound of that. But Elena shook her head. We can't fight a cartel, Jake. That's suicide. We need to fix this at the source. Prove Sarah isn't who they think she is and make them lose interest. Jake considered this. Elena was right. Violence would only escalate the situation. They needed a smarter solution. Tech, can you contact the federal marshals handling Jennifer Martinez's case? Tech nodded. I can try. Why? Because we need them to confirm Jennifer is safe and send that confirmation to the Valdez cartel through back channels. Once the cartel knows they grabbed the wrong person, they'll back off. That's assuming they believe it, Preacher added. These aren't reasonable people. Then we make them believe it, Jake said. We give them proof they can't ignore. Over the next hour, they formulated a plan. Tech would reach out to his old contacts in federal law enforcement and arrange for Jennifer Martinez to be briefly visible in the system. A parole check-in, a court appearance, something that would confirm she was alive and in custody far away from Arizona. Meanwhile, Jake would arrange a meeting with a neutral intermediary, someone the cartel trusted, to deliver the message. Sarah Chen was the wrong target, and continuing to pursue her would bring consequences the cartel didn't want. It was risky, but it was smarter than a head-on confrontation that would get people killed. Sarah listened to the plan with growing anxiety. You're putting yourselves in danger because of me. Jake knelt beside her chair. Sarah, you took a bullet for me in Kandahar. You carried me 3 miles through hell. This isn't even close to repaying that debt. There is no debt, Sarah protested. We were soldiers. We protected each other. Exactly, Jake said. We protected each other then. We protect each other now. That's what the Iron Promise means. Sarah looked around at the faces illuminated by firelight. Warriors, mechanics, teachers, fathers, mothers, all united by something deeper than friendship. She had been alone for so long, raising Lily without support, without family. But now she realized she had never truly been alone. The family had always been there, waiting for the call. Thank you, she whispered, all of you. Marcus raised his beer. To Sarah Chen, welcome to the Brotherhood. 200 voices echoed the toast, and the desert night rang with loyalty and promise. The next morning arrived with the harsh clarity of desert sunrise. Jake stood on the porch of the main ranch house, watching the golden light spread across the landscape while sipping coffee that could strip paint. Behind him, the Brotherhood was beginning to stir, engines being checked, gear being packed. They would disperse soon, returning to their lives, but the bond forged last night would remain. Sarah emerged from the house with Lily at her side, both looking exhausted but whole. Jake handed Sarah a cup of coffee, and she accepted it gratefully. I've been thinking, Sarah said after a long silence, about what you said last night, about the plan to contact the cartel. Jake waited. He knew that tone. Sarah was about to disagree with him. I don't want you putting yourself at risk for a mistake that wasn't your fault. These people are dangerous, Jake. They kill without hesitation. Which is exactly why we can't let them keep hunting you, Jake replied. If we don't end this now, you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Is that what you want for Lily? Sarah's jaw tightened. She looked down at her daughter, who was drawing pictures in the dust with a stick, blissfully unaware of the adult conversation happening above her head. No, Sarah admitted, but I also don't want more people dying because of me. Then trust me, Jake said. "Trust the Brotherhood. We've handled worse than this." The conversation was interrupted by Tech jogging across the yard, his laptop under his arm and an expression of barely contained excitement on his face. "I got through to the marshals," he announced. "It wasn't easy. Had to call in some favors and make some promises I'll probably regret. But they confirmed Jennifer Martinez is alive and in protective custody in Montana. More importantly, they're willing to help us leak that information in a way the Valdez cartel will believe." Jake felt a surge of hope. "How?" "They're going to arrange for Jennifer to make a controlled appearance at a federal courthouse in Billings for a sealed hearing. The appearance will be photographed by court security cameras, time-stamped and verified. Those images will then be anonymously sent to a journalist who covers cartel activity. The story will hit the news, and the cartel will see it." Sarah frowned. "Won't that put Jennifer at risk?" Tech shook his head. "The marshals are moving her immediately after the appearance. By the time the story breaks, she'll be in a new location under a new identity. The cartel will know she's alive, but they won't be able to reach her." "It's elegant," Elena said, joining the conversation. "The cartel gets confirmation they grabbed the wrong person, we get proof Sarah isn't their target, and nobody has to die." Jake nodded slowly. "There's still risk. The cartel might not believe the information or might decide to tie up loose ends anyway." "That's where you come in," Tech said. "We need someone to deliver the message directly to the cartel's local representative, someone they'll take seriously." Jake understood immediately. "You want me to walk into a meeting with cartel representatives and tell them they made a mistake?" "Not just you," Marcus said, stepping forward. 20 of us. Enough to show we're serious, but not so many we look like we're starting a war." "It's insane," Sarah protested. "They'll kill you." "No," Jake said with absolute confidence. "They'll listen, because if they don't, they'll have 200 Iron Promise riders burning their operations to the ground. That's not a threat. It's mathematics." The meeting was arranged for that evening at a neutral location, a roadside bar called the Dusty Spoke, 20 miles outside Copper Ridge. The owner, a former Marine named Collins, owed Jake a favor and agreed to clear the bar for 2 hours. At 7 p.m., Jake arrived with 19 brothers, their motorcycles lined up outside like a statement of intent. Inside, 3 men waited at a corner table. Jake recognized the type immediately. Mid-level cartel operatives, dangerous enough to handle negotiations, but not important enough that their deaths would trigger a war. The leader was a thin man in an expensive suit with cold eyes and a silver ring on his right hand. Jake sat down across from him, Marcus and Eleanor flanking him on either side. The rest of the Brotherhood spread out through the bar, their presence a silent promise of violence if negotiations failed. "You wanted to talk," the cartel representative said in accented English. "Talk." Jake slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed surveillance photos of Jennifer Martinez entering the federal courthouse in Billings, Montana, time-stamped from that morning. "You grabbed the wrong woman," Jake said simply. "Sarah Chen isn't Jennifer Martinez. She never was. Jennifer Martinez is in federal custody, alive and well, 1,000 miles from here." The cartel representative studied the photos with an impassive expression. He pulled out his phone, made a call, and spoke rapidly in Spanish. Jake caught enough to understand he was confirming the authenticity of the images. After 2 minutes, the man ended the call and looked at Jake. "These could be faked." "They're not, and you know it," Jake replied. "Your employer made a mistake. It happens, but now you have a choice. You can accept that mistake, walk away, and focus on your real problems. Or you can continue pursuing an innocent woman and trigger a conflict with the Iron Promise Brotherhood that will cost you far more than it's worth." The representative's eyes flickered to the Brotherhood members positioned throughout the bar. He was calculating odds, weighing risks. "The Iron Promise Brotherhood," he said slowly. "I've heard of you. Veterans, bikers. You think you can threaten us?" "I'm not threatening you," Jake said. "I'm offering you an exit. We both know a war between your organization and mine would be expensive and bloody. We're not asking for money. We're not asking for territory. We're simply asking you to leave Sarah Chen alone. In exchange, we forget this happened. No revenge, no retaliation, clean slate." The representative was silent for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the table. Finally, he picked up the folder and tucked it inside his jacket. "I'll present this to my employer. If what you say is true, the matter will be closed." "And if it's not closed?" Marcus asked, his voice like gravel. The representative met his gaze without flinching. "Then I suppose we'll find out which of us is more committed to violence." He stood and gestured to his companions. They walked toward the door, and Jake felt the tension in the room tighten like a wire about to snap. But then the representative paused at the threshold and looked back. The woman, Sarah Chen. She should be more careful about who she resembles. Coincidence can be fatal in our world. Then he was gone, and the bar erupted in released breath and nervous laughter. Jake remained seated, his heart pounding, but his expression calm. Eleanor put a hand on his shoulder. "You think he'll honor the deal?" "He doesn't have a choice," Jake replied. "The cartel doesn't want attention from law enforcement or a war with veterans who know how to fight. They'll verify the information, realize they made a mistake, and move on. It's business, not personal." Marcus wasn't convinced. "And if they don't?" Jake's expression hardened. "Then we remind them why you don't mess with the Iron Promise Brotherhood." 3 days passed, with no contact from the cartel. Tech monitored police scanners, cartel communications, and news reports, looking for any sign of movement or retaliation. There was nothing. The blue van that had taken Sarah was found abandoned at the Mexican border, wiped clean of evidence. The men who had been arrested at the warehouse refused to talk, and their lawyers arranged bail within 48 hours. They disappeared immediately after release, presumably back across the border. "It's over," Tech announced on the 4th morning. "The cartel's pulled back. I'm monitoring their encrypted channels. Nothing about Sarah or the Brotherhood. They've moved on to other business." Sarah, who had been staying at the ranch with Lily under Brotherhood protection, allowed herself to breathe for the first time in days. "You're sure?" Tech nodded. "As sure as I can be. The story about Jennifer Martinez hit the news yesterday. Cartel leadership would have seen it and confirmed she's in federal custody. Sarah's off their radar." Jake felt the weight lift from his shoulders. "Good, then it's time Sarah and Lily got back to their lives." But Sarah shook her head. "I'm not going back to Phoenix." Jake frowned. "Why not?" "Eat, because everything there reminds me of what happened. The apartment where they grabbed me, the hospital where they were watching me. I can't live like that, Jake. Lily can't grow up looking over her shoulder. So what are you going to do?" Sarah looked around the ranch, at the wide-open desert, the honest people, the sense of community that had saved her life. "I'm going to start over. Redfield needs a nurse. I checked. There's a position open at the county clinic. The pay is less, but the cost of living is lower, and it's safe. Lily can go to a good school, make friends. We can build a life here." Jake felt something warm bloom in his chest. "You're staying?" "If you'll have us," Sarah said. "I know we're not official Brotherhood members, but—" "You saved my life once," Jake interrupted. "That makes you family. Family doesn't need permission to stay." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Thank you, Jake, for everything." The Brotherhood helped Sarah and Lily move into a small house on the edge of Redfield. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that needed updating, a backyard with a tree perfect for a swing. But it was theirs. Over the next weeks, riders stopped by to help with repairs. Marcus fixed the plumbing. Elena painted the bedrooms. Tech installed a security system that would make Fort Knox jealous. Lily started school and made friends immediately, her natural courage and warmth drawing other children to her like moths to flame. Sarah began working at the county clinic and quickly became beloved by her patients for her skill, compassion, and refusal to accept anything less than the best care for everyone who walked through the door. One evening, Jake stopped by to check on them. He found Sarah in the backyard, watching Lily play on the new swing Marcus had installed. The sunset painted the desert gold and red, and for a moment everything felt peaceful and right. "She's happy," Sarah said softly. "I haven't seen her this happy in years." "What about you?" Jake asked. "Are you happy?" Sarah considered the question. "I'm getting there. It's been hard, letting go of the fear. But every day gets a little easier. Every day I remember that we're safe, that we have people who care about us. That's more than I ever thought we'd have." Jake sat down on the porch steps beside her. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. In Kandahar, when you carried me 3 miles through enemy territory, why did you do it? You could have left me. It would have been smarter, safer." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Because leaving you would have meant becoming someone I didn't want to be. We take care of each other, Jake. That's what soldiers do. That's what humans do if they're any good." "The iron promise," Jake said. Sarah smiled. The iron promise. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Lily swing higher and higher, her laughter carrying across the desert evening. In the distance, the sound of motorcycles rumbled on the highway, brothers heading home after a day's work, secure in the knowledge that their family was safe. Jake thought about promises, the ones we make in war, the ones we keep in peace, and the ones that define who we are when everything else falls away. He had made a promise to Sarah 20 years ago, a promise forged in fire and sealed in loyalty. Tonight, that promise had been fulfilled, but he knew with absolute certainty that it wasn't over. The iron promise wasn't a one-time debt to be repaid and forgotten. It was a living thing, renewed every day, in every act of loyalty and protection. It was family, chosen and permanent. If this story has moved you, hit that like button and let us know in the comments. Your support helps us share more stories of loyalty and courage. 6 months later, Sarah and Lily had settled into their new life with the ease of people who had finally found where they belonged. The house in Redfield had been transformed. Fresh paint, a garden in the backyard, photographs on the walls documenting their new beginning. Lily was thriving in school, her natural intelligence and fierce determination earning her the respect of teachers and students alike. She had also developed an unexpected passion for mechanics, spending weekends at the Brotherhood's garage learning to fix motorcycles under Marcus's patient instruction. Sarah had become an integral part of the community. The county clinic, which had been struggling before her arrival, was now thriving under her leadership. She had organized a volunteer network, secured grants for equipment, and personally trained a new generation of nurses in trauma care. People came from 3 counties over to be treated by Doc Sarah, as she had become known, but the quiet life was about to be disrupted. Jake received a call on a Tuesday morning from a contact in the Federal Marshal Service, the same person who had helped arrange Jennifer Martinez's courthouse appearance months earlier. "We have a problem," the marshal said without preamble. "Jennifer Martinez is missing." Jake felt ice form in his stomach. "What do you mean, missing?" "She was relocated to Montana after the courthouse appearance. Everything was fine for 5 months. Then, 3 days ago, she missed a scheduled check-in. When we went to her location, she was gone. No sign of struggle, no note, nothing. Just vanished." "You think the cartel found her?" "We don't know, but if they did, and if they think Sarah Chen helped her disappear..." Jake didn't need him to finish the sentence. "I'll handle it." He immediately called an emergency Brotherhood meeting. Within 2 hours, 60 riders had assembled at the ranch, their expressions grim when they heard the news. "This doesn't make sense," Elena said. "We proved Sarah wasn't Jennifer. Why would the cartel care if Jennifer disappeared?" "Because they're paranoid," Tech replied. "If Jennifer vanished, they might think someone helped her, someone with connections, someone like us." Marcus pounded his fist on the table. "We can't let them come after Sarah again. We need to find Jennifer first and prove the Brotherhood had nothing to do with her disappearance." "Agreed," Jake said. "Tech, can you track Jennifer's movements?" Tech was already typing. "Give me an hour." While Tech worked, Jake went to Sarah's house to warn her. He found her in the clinic, treating a rancher who had been kicked by a horse. When she saw Jake's expression, she immediately understood something was wrong. "What happened?" "Jennifer Martinez is missing. The feds think the cartel might believe we helped her disappear." Sarah's face went pale. "But we didn't." "I know, but the cartel doesn't know that. We need to find Jennifer and prove we're not involved, or this whole situation starts over." Sarah set down her medical instruments and turned to her patient. "Mr. Henderson, I need to step out for a moment. Keep pressure on that wound." She followed Jake outside, her jaw set with determination. "What can I do to help?" "Nothing," Jake said firmly. "You stay here with Lily. Let us handle this." "Jake, this is my problem." "No," Jake interrupted. "This is our problem. That's what family means. You don't face this alone." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Find her, Jake. If Jennifer's in danger because of me, I need to know she's safe." Jake promised he would, then returned to the ranch. Tech had already made progress. Jennifer's last known location was a rental house outside Billings. "I hacked the landlord's security system. Look at this." He pulled up footage from 3 days ago, showing Jennifer Martinez leaving the house at midnight with a packed bag. She looked around nervously, then climbed into a car with Montana plates and drove away. "She ran," Elena said. "Why?" Tech zoomed in on the timestamp. This was 2 hours after a black SUV drove past her house 3 times. Watch. The footage showed an SUV with tinted windows making repeated passes, slowing each time it approached Jennifer's house. "Cartel?" Marcus asked. "Maybe. Or maybe she just got paranoid and ran. Either way, we need to find her before the cartel does." Jake studied the footage. "Can you track the car?" "Already did. License plate traces to a rental company in Missoula. Jennifer Martinez, or whatever name she's using now, rented it 6 months ago and never returned it. But here's where it gets interesting." Tech pulled up cell tower data. Her phone pinged 3 towers heading south from Billings. Last ping was near the Idaho border, then nothing. Either she ditched the phone or turned it off. "Smart woman," Marcus said approvingly. "She knows how to disappear." "Which makes her harder to find," Jake pointed out. "Tech, can you predict where she might go?" Tech ran several algorithms, cross-referencing Jennifer's background, known associates, and travel patterns. She grew up in New Mexico. Her mother died 5 years ago, but she has an aunt in Albuquerque. If Jennifer's running scared, she might head somewhere familiar. "Then that's where we start," Jake said. "Marcus, Elena, Preacher, gear up. We ride to Albuquerque." The ride to Albuquerque took 2 days, the Brotherhood convoy moving fast through the desert landscape. They arrived on a Thursday afternoon. The city sprawled out against the Sandia Mountains like a modern pueblo. Tech had identified Jennifer's aunt, Maria Gonzalez, age 63, living in a modest neighborhood on the city's west side. Jake and Elena approached the house while the rest of the team stayed back. They knocked, and after a long pause, an elderly woman opened the door. Her eyes widened when she saw Jake's iron promise vest. "You're not police," she said in accented English. "No, ma'am," Jake replied. "We're friends of Jennifer Martinez. We're trying to make sure she's safe." Maria's expression became guarded. "I don't know any Jennifer Martinez. Mrs. Gonzalez, please. We're not here to hurt anyone. But Jennifer's in danger, and we need to find her before people who want to hurt her do." Maria studied them for a long moment, then sighed and opened the door wider. She's not here, but she was. 2 days ago. She showed up at midnight, scared out of her mind, said people were following her, that she couldn't trust the federal marshals anymore. Where did she go? Eleanor asked gently. She didn't say, but she took money from me and asked about bus routes to Mexico. I think she's trying to disappear completely. Jake's mind raced. If Jennifer crossed into Mexico, she would be beyond their help and vulnerable to the cartel on their home territory. Mrs. Gonzalez, did Jennifer say why she didn't trust the marshals? Oui, she said one of them had been asking too many questions about her past, about people she knew in Arizona. She thought he might be working for the cartel. Jake felt the pieces clicking together. A dirty marshal. That's why the cartel found her in Montana. Someone on the inside gave them her location. If that's true, Elena said, then Jennifer's running from both the cartel and corrupt federal agents. She's completely alone. Jake turned to Maria. If Jennifer contacts you again, tell her to call this number. He handed her a card with the Brotherhood's emergency line. Tell her we can protect her, but only if she trusts us. Maria took the card uncertainly. Why would you help her? You don't even know her. No, because a friend of ours got caught up in this mess, Jake said, and we protect our own. Jennifer didn't ask for any of this. She deserves better. Maria's eyes softened. You're good people. I'll tell her if she calls. They returned to the team and shared what they had learned. The revelation of a dirty federal marshal complicated everything. We need to report this, Preacher said. But to who? Tech countered. If there's a corrupt marshal, we don't know how deep the rot goes. We report it to the wrong person, and Jennifer's location gets leaked again. Jake made a decision. We find Jennifer first. Once she's safe, we figure out who to trust in the federal system. How do we find someone who doesn't want to be found? Marcus asked. Tech smiled grimly. We think like someone who's running scared. Jennifer needs money, new identification, and a way across the border that doesn't involve official crossings. That means black market services. Coyotes, Elena said, using the slang term for human smugglers. There are 3 major networks operating out of Albuquerque. If Jennifer's smart, she'll avoid the big ones and go for a smaller operator. Tech pulled up a list of known smuggling facilitators in the area. There's a guy named Raul Vega who runs a small operation out of a pawn shop downtown. He's got a reputation for discretion and has helped other people disappear before. Then that's our next stop, Jake said. The pawn shop was a dingy storefront wedged between a laundromat and a payday loan office. Jake entered alone while the others waited outside, not wanting to spook anyone with a show of force. Inside, the shop smelled of dust and desperation. A heavy-set man with graying hair stood behind the counter, watching a small television. Help you? Raul Vega asked without looking up. I'm looking for someone, Jake said. A woman who might have come through here in the last couple days, asking about transportation to Mexico. Raul finally looked at him, his eyes calculating. I don't know what you're talking about. Jake placed $500 on the counter. This is for information, not transportation. I'm not law enforcement. I'm not cartel. I'm just someone trying to help a woman who's in over her head. Raul stared at the money, then at Jake's iron promise vest. Your brotherhood. I am. I've heard of you. People say you keep your word. We do. Raul pocketed the money. A woman came through yesterday, matched the description you're probably thinking of. She wanted passage to Ciudad Juarez, but I told her that was suicide. Cartel owns that city. She'd be dead in a week. Where did you send her? I didn't send her anywhere, but I told her about a safe house in Las Cruces, just north of the border, run by a priest who helps people who need to disappear. If she's smart, that's where she went. Jake got the address and returned to the team. Las Cruces, we ride tonight. But as they mounted their bikes, Tech's phone buzzed with an alert. We've got a problem, he announced, his face pale. Local police just issued a bolo for Jennifer Martinez. Says she's wanted for questioning in connection with federal witness tampering and obstruction of justice. That's a setup, Elena said immediately. Someone's trying to flush her out. Jake's expression hardened. Then we find her before the police do. Let's move. Las Cruces sat at the edge of the desert like a last outpost before the border. The safe house Raoul had mentioned was a small church on the city's outskirts, its white walls glowing in the moonlight. Jake and his team parked their motorcycles a block away and approached on foot. The church was dark and silent, but Jake could see fresh tire tracks in the dust outside. Someone had been here recently. They entered through a side door, moving quietly through the nave. In the back office they found Father Miguel, an elderly priest with kind eyes and work-worn hands. He looked up as they entered, showing no surprise or fear. "You're looking for the woman," he said simply. Jake nodded. "Is she here?" She was. She left an hour ago, said she couldn't stay, that she was bringing danger to everyone around her. Did she say where she was going? Father Miguel hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. She's at the old mission 10 miles north. It's been abandoned for years, but she said she needed time to think, to figure out her next move. I gave her supplies and told her to be careful. Jake felt urgency thrumming through his veins. "Father, Jennifer's in serious danger. There are people looking for her, bad people. We need to reach her before they do." "Then go quickly," Father Miguel said, "and may God protect you all." The old mission was a crumbling structure of adobe and wood, its bell tower silhouetted against the star-filled sky. The Brotherhood surrounded the building carefully, watching for signs of other visitors. Jake approached the front entrance and called out softly, "Jennifer Martinez! My name is Jake Mercer. I'm with the Iron Promise Brotherhood. We're here to help you." Silence. Then, from inside, a woman's voice. "How do I know you're not with them?" "Because if I was, you'd already be dead," Jake replied honestly. "We're friends of Sarah Chen. You know that name?" Another pause. Sarah Chen was the woman they grabbed by mistake. They thought she was me. "That's right, and we got her back. Now we're here to make sure you're safe too." Slowly, the door creaked open. Jennifer Martinez stood in the threshold, a gun in her trembling hand. She was thin and exhausted, her eyes haunted by months of running. But there was steel in her spine, a refusal to give up that reminded Jake of every soldier who had ever refused to surrender. "Why should I trust you?" Jennifer asked. "Because Sarah trusted us," Jake said, "and we kept her safe. Let us do the same for you." Jennifer's hand wavered, then she lowered the gun. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Jake gestured for his team to stand down. "Then come with us. We'll get you somewhere safe, somewhere the cartel can't reach." "It's not just the cartel," Jennifer said, her voice breaking. "There's a federal marshal named David Kellerman. He's been feeding information to the cartel. He's the reason they found me in Montana. He's the reason I've been running." "We suspected as much," Elena said gently. "That's why we're not taking you to the feds. We have our own safe houses, our own network. You'll be protected." Jennifer looked at them, these rough bikers with their leather vests and scarred faces, and saw what Sarah had seen months ago. Not criminals or vigilantes, but family, people who kept their promises. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll trust you." They moved quickly, getting Jennifer on a motorcycle behind Elena and heading back toward Arizona. But they hadn't gone 10 miles when Tech's phone buzzed urgently. "We've got company," he announced. "Local police spotted our convoy leaving Las Cruces. They're following us and they've called for backup." Jake cursed under his breath. Kellerman must have tipped them off. He wants Jennifer taken into custody so he can hand her over to the cartel. "What do we do?" Marcus asked. "We can't outrun police helicopters." Jake's mind raced through options. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and technically harboring a federal fugitive, but giving up wasn't in the Brotherhood's vocabulary. "Tech, call Sheriff Coleman in Redfield. Tell him we're bringing Jennifer in voluntarily, but we need guarantees she'll be protected from corrupt federal agents." "On it," Tech said, already dialing. Meanwhile, Jake signaled the convoy to maintain speed, but stay within legal limits. They weren't running, they were escorting. The police cruisers caught up within minutes, their lights flashing but sirens silent. They matched the Brotherhood's pace, creating an escort rather than a pursuit. Tech's negotiation with Sheriff Coleman was working. After 20 tense minutes, Tech gave a thumbs up. "Coleman's coordinating with the state police and FBI. They're aware of the allegations against Marshal Kellerman and agree to take Jennifer into protective custody under their supervision, not the Marshal Service. We're being escorted to a neutral location where Jennifer will be transferred." Jennifer, overhearing this on Elena's radio, tensed. "How do I know they won't just hand me over to Kellerman?" "Because Sheriff Coleman is one of us," Jake said over the radio. "He's a veteran, and he understands the code. He won't let you down." The transfer happened at a rest stop 30 miles outside Albuquerque. FBI agents were waiting, along with Sheriff Coleman and a woman Jake recognized as Deputy Director Patricia Reeves, someone with a reputation for rooting out corruption. Jennifer climbed off Elena's motorcycle and stood uncertainly between two worlds: the bikers who had saved her and the federal agents who represented both her protection and her betrayal. Deputy Director Reeves approached with her hands visible and non-threatening. "Ms. Martinez, I'm Deputy Director Reeves. I've been briefed on your situation, including the allegations against Marshal Kellerman. I want you to know we're taking this seriously. You'll be placed under FBI protection, not the Marshal Service, until we can investigate and neutralize the threat." Jennifer looked back at Jake. "Will I ever be safe?" "That depends on you," Jake said. "You can keep running, keep hiding, and eventually they'll find you. Or you can stand up, testify, and put these people away forever. The Brotherhood can't protect you from the legal system, but we can make sure you get a fair shake." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "I'll testify. I'll tell them everything I know about the cartel and about Kellerman." Deputy Director Reeves smiled approvingly. "That's very brave, Ms. Martinez. Come with me. We have a lot of work to do." As the FBI convoy drove away with Jennifer, Jake felt Elena's hand on his shoulder. "You think she'll be okay?" "I think she's tougher than anyone gives her credit for," Jake replied. "She survived this long on her own. Now she's got people watching her back. She'll make it." The Brotherhood mounted their bikes and began the ride home, the desert night wrapping around them like a familiar blanket. They had done what they set out to do, protected an innocent woman, exposed corruption, and kept their promise to Sarah. 2 months later, Marshal David Kellerman was arrested on federal charges of conspiracy, bribery, and obstruction of justice. His testimony, combined with Jennifer Martinez's evidence, led to the indictment of 17 cartel members and the dismantling of a major smuggling network. Jennifer entered witness protection again, this time under FBI supervision with safeguards to prevent leaks. Sarah received a letter from her shortly after, brief but heartfelt. "Thank you for having friends like the Iron Promise Brotherhood. Because of you, I finally get to live without fear. Be well, Jay." Sarah stood in her backyard, reading the letter while watching Lily play with neighborhood children. The little girl who had been terrified and alone was now confident and surrounded by friends. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Jake pulled up on his motorcycle, the engine's rumble announcing his arrival before he appeared. He had made it a habit to check on Sarah and Lily regularly, though everyone knew it was less about security and more about family. "Everything okay?" Jake asked, climbing off his bike. Sarah handed him the letter. "Jennifer's safe. It's finally over." Jake read it and smiled. "Good. She deserves peace." "So do you," Sarah said pointedly. "You've spent months protecting other people. When do you get to rest?" Jake shrugged. "I rest when I'm riding. That's enough for me." Sarah shook her head fondly. "You're impossible." "I prefer dedicated," Jake countered with a grin. They sat on the porch steps, watching the sun set over the desert. It painted the landscape in shades of gold and crimson, a daily reminder that even harsh places could be beautiful. "I've been thinking," Sarah said after a long silence. "About what?" "About starting a community program at the clinic, teaching people basic first aid, emergency response, trauma care, the kind of skills that save lives when help is minutes away." Jake looked at her with admiration. "That's a great idea. You'll need instructors. I was hoping the Brotherhood might help. You've all got medical training from the military, and you know how to stay calm in emergencies." "We'd be honored," Jake said. "Consider it done." Over the following months, the program grew into something extraordinary. Veterans taught teenagers how to apply tourniquets and perform CPR. Nurses trained community volunteers in wound care and shock management. The clinic became a hub of education and empowerment, giving people the tools to protect each other. Lily, now 8 years old and fascinated by medicine, became the program's youngest volunteer. She organized supply drives, practiced bandaging on anyone who would sit still, and announced her intention to become a doctor when she grew up. "Just like my mom, but for emergencies," she explained to anyone who would listen. Sarah watched her daughter bloom with pride and gratitude. The scared little girl who had slipped a note to a stranger had become a confident young person who believed she could make a difference. That transformation, Sarah knew, was the real legacy of the Iron Promise Brotherhood. One evening, the Brotherhood gathered at the ranch for their monthly meeting. It had become tradition to share a meal, discuss business, and simply enjoy each other's company. Jake stood to make an announcement. "I want to talk about what the Iron Promise means," he began. "We started as veterans helping veterans. We became bikers helping anyone who needed it. But I think we're something more now. We're proof that family isn't just biology. It's choice. It's showing up when others would walk away. It's keeping promises even when it's hard." He paused, looking around at the assembled faces, mechanics and teachers, truckers and nurses, people from every walk of life, united by loyalty and purpose. Sarah and Lily taught us something important. They reminded us that the promises we make matter, that the bonds we forge in crisis don't dissolve when the crisis ends. They become part of who we are. Sarah stood and raised her glass. "To the Iron Promise Brotherhood, you gave me and Lily a second chance at life. You gave us a family, and you reminded us that there are still people in this world who keep their word." The Brotherhood rose as one, glasses raised. "To the Iron Promise," they said in unison. The words echoed across the desert night, a vow renewed and strengthened by everything they had endured together. Years would pass. Lily would graduate high school, attend medical school, and return to Redfield to work alongside her mother. She would marry a fellow doctor, have children of her own, and teach them the lesson she had learned as a scared 7-year-old, that courage means trusting strangers to become family, and that some promises are worth keeping forever. Sarah would continue her work at the clinic, training new generations of medical professionals and emergency responders. She would never forget the night she was taken or the brotherhood that brought her home. And whenever a patient asked about the Iron Cross tattoo visible beneath her sleeve, a tattoo she had gotten on her 40th birthday, she would smile and tell them the story. Jake would ride for many more years, the rumble of his engine a constant in the desert landscape. He would rescue more people, keep more promises, and build a legacy that transcended individual acts of heroism. The Iron Promise Brotherhood would grow, spreading to other states, other communities, always maintaining the core principles that defined them: loyalty, honor, and the unwavering commitment to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. But the story that started with a little girl slipping a note to a biker would remain the Brotherhood's defining moment. It would be told and retold around campfires and bar tables, embellished and mythologized, but always carrying the same essential truth: that one act of courage can change everything, that one promise kept can save a life, and that family, real family, is built not in moments of peace, but in fires of adversity. The desert wind would continue to blow across Arizona, carrying the sound of motorcycle engines and the echo of promises kept. And somewhere, a new generation of children would learn that if they were ever in trouble, if they ever needed help, they should look for the person wearing the Iron Cross. Because some promises never fade, some bonds never break, and some families are forever. Thank you for riding with us through this journey. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the power of loyalty and the importance of keeping promises, please subscribe to our channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, in a world that often feels cold and indifferent, there are still people who will drop everything to help a stranger. Be one of those people. Until next time, ride safe and keep your promises. We'll see you on the road.